you're not consistent with your training, you're not going to see any progress this year. And if you take 2 weeks off in the year, then everything's going to go to hell.
Understanding that, again, a week or two of modifications is a very small drop in the bucket, particularly on longer time scales.
This is probably pretty phase dependent in terms of what you're going to prioritize on that front as well in terms of the exact protocol. From Cindy, training and vacation considerations, tips, and approaches. This one is not very research-based, which is nice. We got to sit back and sip our whatever, our bourbon, and chat about training and vacation. Yep. You want me to kick this one off?
Go for it. Yep.
All right. So I think about, like, if I were to have a new client and inevitably they're going to have some sort of schedule interruption. So let's say it's a vacation, and I know it's coming up in a couple months. I usually I have good processes for asking about these things, so I kind of know when they're coming, and I'll kind of ask beforehand, like, hey, what do you want to do? And I actually don't think that's all that common. I think some people have, like, very strong opinions one way or the other of, like, if you're on vacation, you shouldn't train. For some reason, if you're, spending money on flights and accommodations on your trip and you're also going to the gym, then you have some bad relationship with training that you need to do something about. And then on the other end of the spectrum, it's like, dude, if you're not consistent with your training, you're not going to see any progress this year. And if you take 2 weeks off in the year, then everything's going to go to hell. So there are definitely cases where I'm going to lean one way or the other for certain people. For example, if I do suspect someone just kind of has to take a step back from training and maybe learn to go a week without training because I maybe there's something I suspect there in terms of their relationship with training. Or maybe it's kind of on the other end of the spectrum of, like, I think that could reignite the fire for training. I might recommend, hey, don't train. Or if someone's, in close proximity to a meet, or they have really, really ambitious goals, and that's something we've talked about, like, hey, we're looking to get everything we can out of training, then it's like, okay, let's probably keep training on vacation. But anyway, in the absence of those extremes, I just like to ask, like, hey, do you prefer to train on vacation, or do you prefer to not, or somewhere in between? And I think we can and should lean into that. For me, there are certain trips that I go on where I really want to train. It kind of depends who I'm with and where I'm going. And there are other trips where I don't want to train. I went to New England and did a road trip this last year, kind of all over the states there, the national parks, all that good stuff. I was very, very active. I didn't even want to think about where to go to the gym. I hadn't missed a week of training up to that point. I did not touch a weight, right? Whereas I had some trips to the Midwest in the wintertime. You don't get a whole lot of steps during that. You kind of feel like crap all the time. So I was very consistent with training during those periods because it just kind of fit into the trip a little bit better. So my first tip is lean into your preference and be mindful of kind of what you need to keep your mind sharp from a physical activity perspective based on what your trip is. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, and I will now give my biggest contribution to this list in terms of, I think from like the nuts and bolts perspective of the training that you are doing, if you decide that that's the right thing for you, I think just having a clear priority system is probably the biggest thing. So if you're a powerlifter, understanding that, certain exercises inherently come with a higher priority than others, that might be a little bit phase dependent if you're, trying to, in like a muscle growth kind of oriented phase, maybe you're going to bias other things rather than others. But I would say in general, sticking to the squat, bench, deadlift and close variations thereof, and kind of consolidating that into a smaller number of training days. If you aren't able to get to the gym in your kind of normal schedule, that's kind of, step A. And then you kind of fill in training with the other major muscle groups, probably predominantly focusing on multi-joint exercises to kind of hit everything. So for example, if you're short on time and you want to try to continue to train your back and your biceps to some degree, but you're also not trying to, have any superfluous exercises in there that are going to add up in terms of the time you're accumulating. Maybe you just pick the multi-joint back exercise. It's going to give you some sort of loaded elbow flexion. It's still going to kind of train your biceps.
But
now,
arm days and sandals, or with the hotel gym equipment,
and that's where you got to know your priority. And if you're a
Yeah.
bodybuilder and you really want to just go to the hotel gym and just blast some bis and tries, you can also do that, and that's totally fine. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is just, you're going to probably condense things. Having a clear system of priorities is probably the easiest way to help you do that, and understanding that, again, a week or two of modifications is a very small drop in the bucket, particularly on longer time scales. And so, missing things in an optimal sense, I don't think it's a big deal.
I think ultimately what you're saying is just having some slots that are optional.
Yeah.
So basically just greater flexibility in training. So, okay, training this week, maybe just kind of plan ahead a little bit in terms of like, hey, I'm going to get 2 to 4 sessions in this week. So you're kind of making 2 your mandatory, and I'm going to get my first 3 slots in, or my first 3 exercises for when I do go to the gym. The rest are optional, because maybe things are pretty dynamic on that trip in terms of, getting to a gym, how much time you're going to have, et cetera. So basically just keeping things flexible. Obviously,
Protocols too. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of protocols as well, right? Like maybe you don't have time to work up to a top set, and if you're particularly strong, or you take a while to warm up for one reason or another, this is probably pretty phase dependent in terms of what you're going to prioritize on that front as well in terms of the exact protocol. But I think we're both coming at this from a pretty like chill perspective, like kind of viewing 1 week of vacation as a drop in the bucket. Obviously, this changes with someone that travels once a month, right? Or to me, I'm thinking of vacation as like twice a year. That seems pretty standard from my experience. And in that case, you could even make an argument why taking both of those weeks off, completely off, could improve your progress throughout the calendar year. I'm not going to put my flag in the ground on that claim exactly, but at the very least, I don't think it's going to be a very tangible difference. Another thing that I do on this front, and again, I just like to really think ahead about these things, so kind of have those conversations ahead of time, make sure I'm clear on kind of like, just obviously the client's values in general, what the trip's going to look like, that sort of thing, so we can plan accordingly. The other thing I like to do is to work around it, right? So like another reason I feel like I can be pretty chill with this with a client is because I'm going to put like lower priority weeks on that vacation week. So if I know that, we have 10 weeks of training until a vacation, and that individual is not going to be, maybe they are still going to train, but things are just not, it's just not going to be as much of a priority in the day. Things are going to kind of be out of whack. I'm probably going to do 2 5-week blocks and try to time it up so that we start a new block the week they're on vacation, because we're going to kind of intro into the block anyway. It's going to be a lower priority week, more of a recovery or deload oriented week. Cool, we can time that up with the vacation, and the vacation has a minimal impact on the training plan, as opposed to trying to say, hey, we're hitting your heaviest week of the block this week, and oh shoot, you're on vacation. Dang, we should have thought ahead about that. So just trying to time up deloads and intro weeks with vacations, I think, is a game changer as well.